Hi everybody, this is Kat with the Hobby Hangout, bringing you another tutorial session with Caleb Wissenback from CK Studios. He'll be sharing some tips and tricks tonight on the topic of painting it black. And I'm going to turn it over to you now, Caleb. Let me find you.
Hey everybody, this is Caleb with CK Studios, and tonight we're going to talk about painting it black. A lot of people kind of struggle with this color. It's not really any different than other colors. It's understanding how highlights work, how quickly transitions need to be. Some colors have very long, slow transition, which make them very easy to paint. Reds, yellows, oranges, stuff like that. A lot of the warm colors will have a nice slow transition. So it's easy to figure out the color, to read the color that you're painting. With black, a lot of times people will paint it with just grays, and they end up looking gray. And your model either looks gray or it looks black with some gray edge highlights. But if you look at natural gray or natural black, you'll see that it takes on a spectrum of color. It takes on a lot of different colors. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about tonight. So I'm going to show you guys a couple little tricks that I have, how to base coat, how to kind of create the image that something is going to be black, and then how to kind of make it a little more dynamic, so that it's not quite so monotone, it's not so monochromatic. That happens a lot also with grays, as they become very monochromatic. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my camera over to my work center, and then we'll kind of discuss a few models that I have for a minute that are examples, and then we'll go into my technique. So hold on one second. Okay, so here we are at my work center. I have my nice little CK Studio sticker to make sure that I keep my hands in the right place and I'm not working off the screen. I do that a lot if you guys have watched my last videos. Kat's here to take questions, so if you guys have any questions, if you're watching along, I guess, on YouTube or whatever, you can feel free to write it in the chat. How do they do that, Kat?
I posted in the Hobby Hangout, and they can post over there and ask questions. I'll be going back and forth and looking for them.
Okay. We also have a few of our friends that are live with us right now. We have, who do we have? We got AJ and...
Got AJ, we got Chuck, we got Sarge, we got Lee, we have Liz, and you and I.
Oh, you're Hobby.
Yeah, I'm Hobby Hangout.
Okay. So, anyway, good one. So we have some friends with us live that will be able to ask questions in the future. If you guys would like to be on and kind of participate, ask questions and stuff like that, you're always welcome to. I think we max out at 9 people.
10, yeah.
10 people with me. So anyways, without further ado, we'll kind of talk about it. The first model that I have that I want to discuss is just one of the Guild Ball models. It's what's her name, Filet or something like that?
I don't remember.
Yeah. This camera is very temperamental, but we'll slowly zoom in so that you guys can kind of get a good feel for how the model looks. So you can see here that the model definitely reads as black, especially when it has a lot of the other colors around it to help create the illusion of it. Especially when you look at it from the top, you're going to notice it reads a lot of grays and stuff like that, but you still can tell that it's a black. It's a reflective, shiny black. The more you look at it, you'll start to notice there's some reds in there, and there's a little bit of greens in there. I'm not sure how well they're picking up. There we go. There's a little bit better light on it. We kind of start to see how some of the color changes that we create to give it the proper volume and depth, but still read as black. So here's one example. Then here's another example with a lot more time put in. We're going to see a lot smoother of the transitions in the colors. And there's going to be a lot more depth in the color. This model took quite a bit longer to do, but you'll notice it really reads black when you look at it, but it has the proper highlighting. It has the proper movement, volume, and shape, especially if you look at the back of the legs right there. You'll see a lot of blues and grays in there, but then as I roll, you'll notice, like right here, right in here, you're starting to read some purples and reds. And those are going to kind of counteract the blues to create that volume and depth, to give it a little more vibrancy. So here's the two examples that I kind of wanted to show. You definitely take a look at how we're going to create the idea of black. So for this, I have the Assassin model, one of the GW Assassin models. I think this is the Vindicare. And I've already gone ahead and I primed him, but then I base coated him. And it's a kind of a dark gray is what I base coated. It's a slightly blue based gray. And you're going to notice all of my base colors in my blacks are going to be blue based. If our grays, if we just go with a plain gray, we just go with a flat gray, the model becomes very monochromatic, and it'll almost look like you just took and painted it black and then started some zenithal highlighting with some grays. We kind of want to stay away from that. We want to create a little more interest in the model, a little more depth. So I'm going to have just a touch of blue with my gray. I think for this one I used one of the Minotaur lines, and I actually mixed two colors. I mixed like a granite stone or something like that with lagoon blue, and I just added just a touch of the lagoon blue to it to create this color that I have here for the gray. So once I have my base coat down, I'm going to go in and I'm going to start kind of sketching in my highlights. The first color I'm going to use to sketch in my highlights is going to be this color right here. This is Reaper's Winter Blue. It's a very gray based blue. When you look at my palette, here, I'll slide my palette in. That's the blue I'm going to use right here. This is the first color that I'm going to use. It's gray, but it's a blue based gray. Then I'm going to have a couple highlight colors. I'm going to come into a blue. Here it's kind of a sky blue. It's Reaper's Frost Blue. There we are. Reaper Frost Blue. That's one of the Bones colors. And then I also use Ghost White. I don't want to use a pure white because if we go with pure white, we're going to end up turning a little monochromatic. So I have a blue-based white. It's a nice cold white, Ghost White. I really like these colors. Reaper has a really nice set of tinted whites. They have Ghost White, which is a blue-based white. They have Maggot White, which is a green-based white. They're the only company I know of that has a green-based white. I love that color. And then they also have, what's that cream color? It's almost like an ivory. I don't have it out in front of me right now, but they also have another yellow-based white, a very warm white. So I play with those three colors a lot as my highlight color. I'm going to kind of base with that. So I'll move my palette back out of the way. We'll come back onto the model. And what we're looking at is we're trying to find the nice detail areas that are going to really show on this. We're going to come across the chest plates here along the legs. He's very muscular leg. So we want to, it's really skin tight fitting. It's almost like a latex bodysuit or something. So we're going to try to create a glossy look to that. Whereas if we were using a softer fabric right here, like this heavy leather, we're not going to get quite as much of a reflection because the leather, even though the leather is polished, it will still be just slightly duller because it's going to lay flat, which means it's not going to have a lot of edges to create the reflection and light. But with this model here, we have a lot of movement, a lot of shape, and all of those little variants are going to collect light. So the first thing I'll do is I'll come in and I'm just going to kind of bulk in those highlight areas across the knee pad along these reflections here. Is that close enough, or do I need to zoom in just a little more?
I think you're good.
Okay. Along the chest here.
Can't see the bottom. I guess it's the opposite for you, the top. Your camera's backwards, so there you go. Nope, go back. There you go.
Yeah, let's move it a little closer to me. There we go. We can kind of get over the model a little more.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come in here And again, I'm going to place these highlights across the chest, along these plates, across the biceps here. Just where the light's going to catch. Across the face mask, I'm going to roll him up just a little bit so I can see him a little better. Along the brow, across the helmet. And you can see I'm not being real clean with the placements of my highlights right now. I'm just sketching. If you guys watched some of the blending classes, you kind of recognize this technique. By just going in and kind of sketching the colors in real quick, if there's anything I don't like, I can change it. But if I sit and do a lot of blending, I'm kind of stuck with where I'm at with my light. If I'm unhappy with it, it's going to take a lot more effort to change. But here, just by kind of sketching this in, I can play with the reflections. I can play with the light and make sure that it's reading right. So now I've kind of done that first little coat of highlight. I'm going to take some of that lighter blue, the frost blue, and I'm going to mix it with that gray and make a little bit lighter of a gray. I'm going to come in and start to create my next set of highlights.
Caleb,
Yes.
We have a question from Ken.
Okay.
Go ahead and unmute Ken and go for it.
Thank you. Still muted.
Ken. Yeah, looks like it. He might not be there with us. Okay, go ahead and keep going. I'll see what he had. Okay, he's gonna send it to me in a text message.
Okay.
He said he's not sure why I didn't hear him, but let me get what his question was.
Okay, so now you're seeing these. You're starting to see a lot more of where the highlights are, where they're going to be placed and stuff like that. This just helps us kind of sketch in, and we'll figure out exactly where those light spots are going to hit, and then how we're going to create our shape and our volume with that. So then finally, I'm going to come in with almost just that pure blue. It's that frost blue, and again, I'm going to come in and I'm going to place just a little bit more of the highlight, a little finer, kind of inside the spots where the density of light is going to collect.
Okay, and our question is, is your paint on the wet palette mixed with any mediums besides water?
No, I just use water with whenever I'm thinning my paints. I just like the consistency of it. I try not to. The only time I ever use like flow improver or anything like that is just when I have to do like freehand. I'll put some flow improver in there to allow the paint to give myself a little more work time and to make the lines just a little bit smoother. But other than that, I just use water to thin. Now, if you are painting with GW paints, they are just a touch thicker and they resist breaking down with water a little bit. You'll notice they'll be slightly chunky. A lot of times with that, I'll just add some Tamiya thinner. I forget the number. It's like X20 or something like that. It's just a Tamiya thinner. It's got a little bit of alcohol in it. That helps to break down the medium with the GW paints. But other than that, no, I just use just plain water to thin my paints.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so now that I've kind of sketched in where my highlights are going to be and stuff, he's looking pretty good. Well, I guess it's that way for you guys. You'll notice one thing is that when you're painting blacks, and this is what I was kind of talking about in the introduction, is how quickly you're going to transition with colors. You'll notice a big field area is going to be gray, and then the highlights happen really fast and really short. Whereas if we were looking at like take this barbarian for instance right here. When you're looking at the highlights like along this leg here, the leg plate, you'll notice that the highlights are really long. The color transitions are really long. You can kind of run them out across the model, like right here in this leg plate. You'll notice they run pretty far. They have nice length to them and everything like that. That's what makes this a little bit easier to paint, is that your highlights create real gradually. They can run a little longer. Whereas when you get something that's very dark in color, you know, in that black, for instance, you'll notice right here along the hand, I have a lot of mid-tone, and then really super fast highlights all the way up to my brightest point. They're not long. They don't really dilly-dally, I like to kind of call it, is where you'll kind of go through your whole transition from mid-tone all the way to highlight, kind of wide, kind of long, whereas with blues and blacks, cold colors, very sharp colors, your highlights need to be real fast. So kind of showing you that, and then I'll kind of explain it by drawing it real quick. If you were to say this is a highlight of red, and this is our base coat, and it's on top of a shadow. So we're doing a layering, right? This is our base coat layer right here. And this is our highlight. As we come in and we start to highlight, we're going to highlight kind of like this. We're going to kind of build nice and slow, and you'll notice the transitions almost even between each point. It's a nice slow transition. Whereas with a blue and then with black especially, we're going to have our base coat, you know, with our shadow coat will be really long too. Our shadow coat's real long like that. Then we have our base coat, and then our highlight is like this. It's really fast. So you're going to notice you have a really long distance here of mid-tone and a really long distance of shadow, but then you have these really fast steps. I guess I should probably draw this as pyramids instead of boobs. Everybody always laughs at those when I leave them on the board in the classes. But that's the example of kind of how quickly your highlights are going to happen in the model. So I approach black a little differently than how I approach like a red or a blue or something like that. I'm going to go in, I'm going to work all the way up to my highlight real quick. And then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to establish how I want to create my points of black. And what I like to do is I'm going to take a black. Right now I'm using a Nor black. Again, it's a slightly blue-based black. It's another Reaper color, I think. Yeah, Nor black right there. It's slightly blue-based. I really like this color. It's just not the plain black, deep black. So what I'll do is I'm going to come in and I'm just going to kind of wash right across where my highlights are, and I'm going to work the paint back into the shadows. This is going to help knock everything down and create this shape of everything that we're looking for. So we kind of did the sketching for the highlights. We know that we have our light at the right points. And now I'm just going to kind of wash it down just a little bit. Oops, I keep turning them upside down for you guys. So here I just kind of went back in and I kind of just washed into those recesses, kind of knocking that color back down a little bit. Now I'm going to take that mid-tone gray that we had and I'm going to mix it with just a little bit of black. You can see right here, I have that gray that we had, that winter gray. I mixed it with a little bit of black to just create a nice transition color there. And now I'm going to come in and just start to feather out. You'll notice I'm losing a lot of the highlights that I created, and that's okay, because we're as soon as we start painting them again, they'll reestablish really quick. I just wanted to make sure with that sketching that I collected at the right area, because the majority of the model is still going to be this dark gray. Again, you know, when we were looking at the drawings on the paper about how quickly your highlights are going to happen, we're going to have a lot of this mid-tone showing. So now we've kind of flattened it back out. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to slowly start bringing up those light points again. So we'll do the same steps that we did, but this time we're going to thin our paints just a little bit. And I'm going to be a lot smoother with my placement of it. So I'm going to come in. And I'm just going to feather. I'm just going to work on this leg. I mean, this model would take me quite a few hours to completely paint, but we'll get it pretty close. In how long do we have, Kat? About an hour or so?
Yeah, however long you need.
I'm just using that spit blending technique. That loaded brush would probably work pretty well on here. I don't have a lot of control when I do it, so I've been kind of shying away from that technique just a little bit.
Can you move the model a little bit, please? It's off our screen. There you go. Thank you. Is any part of this kind of similar to doing non-metallic?
Yes, yeah, it would be. I mean, we're going to have some low and some, what do you call that, ambient reflection, or reflected light. Yes, we will have some reflected light here, because again, we're going to kind of paint him to have like a little bit of like a latex type armor, latex suit. So we'll get some ambient reflection. And the ambient reflection will help create the shape of the model too. Like you'll notice right here on this bicep, on that bottom side of that bicep, I put just a little bit of reflection. It looks right now because the model's kind of laid down, but you'll notice when the model stands up, a lot of those reflections kind of disappear, but they're still there because we're going to have a little bit of that ambient light that's reflecting along him. And we want to make sure and be really careful that that ambient light is not a bright pure light like what our highlight's going to be, because then it'll look odd. So we want to make sure that we're going to be real nice and soft with that light. Probably have it in our brighter shades of gray, but not super bright. So here I'm just working back and forth. I'm kind of bringing some of that gray back in to shorten up some of those highlights. And you'll notice when you're doing this technique, you're going to work back and forth quite often between the highlight and the shadow, and the highlight again, and then the shadow again, and stuff like that. It's just kind of using that glazing style. We kind of talked about that in the blending classes that we did. And all I'm trying to do is just smooth that color, bring it back and forth a few times, so it starts to smooth out. And I can come back in and start to establish my highlights again. And you see how quickly and short I'm being with those highlights. I don't want to be real fast. Or, I mean, I do want to be real fast with them. I don't want them to be real long, wide highlights. They need to be real sharp. And now I'm going to start catching, because this is a brighter color, I'm going to start catching where the light from the surface is going to hit on him. Using that mid-tone right in here, just to start to kind of smooth that out a little bit. I don't think that muscle is supposed to be there. So, Aaron Lovejoy might have been doing a little sculpting on this one. So here, especially on this calf, this is the underside, but I'm going to run just a little bit of that light up that calf because, again, we'll have that ambient light reflection. But what I'll do is come in with some pure black and just shape that knee with some pure black right at the bottom there. And so that's going to break that ambient reflection. You see how that works right there. So that, again, is a lot like non-metallic metal, where you're going to come in, you're going to create some densities and some shadows. So I'll just kind of start working, again, back down. I had it, I have it up pretty good, so now I'm going to come back in with my blacks and start to work this down. Now I'm using pure black. I'm going to create just the most dense of shadows that I can.
Can you move the model again, please? Oh, thank you.
So here, it's starting to tighten up now. We're starting to see a lot more shape and volume to everything, especially when you start to add the very dark black lines. These are going to help to kind of define the shapes that we're looking for. Create a little more movement, a little more volume to the model. And we're almost ready.
Aaron Lovejoy has a question for you.
All right.
He would like to know what your favorite part of the male body is to paint. If you're gonna call him out on that muscle.
Here, I'll go ahead and highlight this for him just a little bit.
All right.
You can see the shape of this. I mean, it's on the model right here.
On the model.
So
Thank you.
yeah,
I hope you're happy, Aaron.
I might even put a little A right there for him. And I'm glad to see that Aaron is watching.
He says thank you.
So now I really have to do a good job. So I'm working my way back up to my highlights again. That's kind of just standard with this technique, is you're gonna go back and forth quite a few times. The more you can work this back and forth, the smoother it's going to get, the better transitions you'll get. If it's tabletop, you could probably get away with doing it just once or twice. But if you're gonna work towards a competition model or a display quality model or something like that, you want to kind of put the time in and really try to smooth these transitions out as best as you can. We really want that shadow to create across the top of this thigh right here, because if you notice, as I was painting that, it started to really start to turn gray. I was losing the black. The model was turning into gray. So I got to reestablish that darker color. Again, it goes back to that. Goes back to that little drawing about the transitions and how long your shadows and your dark base coat is going to be compared to your highlights, how short your highlights are. And again, I haven't even gone to any of the really bright colors yet. I mean, the blue that I'm using is relatively bright, the frost blue. You can see it here. It's a decently bright, but it's nowhere near white. The black is so dark, it's going to really draw out this blue. So we don't need to go really bright. A lot of people will go to pure white with their black, and it becomes too dominant. It looks a little funny. We will put some little points of light to really sell the idea of the reflectiveness of it, but we're not really even going to paint with pure white. The highest color that we'll use, again, will be this ghost white, and that will be like our final touches. Okay. So now you can see it's really starting to take nice shape. Now we're really starting to see where the light reflection is going to be. It's still reading as black, but we're getting nice reflections. But you'll notice it's still very monotone. It's very flat. There's not a lot of interest to the model right now. And that's what we run into when we start trying to create these blacks is it becomes monochromatic. I mean, that's what we're looking at. It's really monochromatic. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create just a pure wash. I'm going to take pure red like this. This is fire red from Reaper. And I'm going to turn this into a glaze. About like that. Not a glaze per se, not like a French blending glaze. I want a decent amount of pigment in it. So I'm going to create that glaze. I'm going to kind of clear my brush. I don't want my brush soaked with it. And I'm just going to come in and I'm going to put this red into all of my shadows. I want to be careful not to let it pool. I just want a nice even coat of this red. We don't want it to go onto that gray blue. If the red gets into the gray blue, we're going to get some really bright purple. So I kind of want to stay just at the edges of that gray blue. I want to be in the shadows, right at that point where the black transitions with that really, really dark gray that we created by mixing the black with the base coat gray. Right at that transition point is where we want to put the red. So I'm kind of staying, whoops, I lit that puddle a little too much. So I'm just gonna soak some of it up. So you can see that red, it's almost barely perceptible. I mean, you can kind of see it in the helmet right in here. As soon as that dries, it becomes just barely perceptible, but it will just give it a hint of red. Once that's done, I'm going to let this set, and it needs to dry just a bit. Once this dries, I'm going to come back in, and now I'm going to create almost that same glaze with the black, and it's going to be very close to the density of the glaze that we were doing at the start when I was starting to just block in those shadows. And I'll do the same thing. I'm just going to come in and right over the top of all of that red, I'm just going to wash this black. This black is transparent, so the red will still show through, but it's not going to read as red. It's not going to be the first color that light reflects off of. It has to go through the transparent black to reflect off of the red. But it will show through, especially when you put this under a really nice bright light. You'll start to see the little nuances of red, like what you saw on the Raven Guard captain. You could see those reds along the back of that foot and stuff. This is the exact same technique. Okay, so now that that's completed, what we'll do is I'll just kind of take a look at the model. I'll spin it around and I'll see if it's catching light in the right spots. Right here, this is just a bit long in the shadow. So I'll bring in some of that mid-tone gray, bring that back just a little bit. I'm going to smooth out these plates right here. They're a little rough. I'm going to go a little darker right in here. Definitely want to smooth this out right here. That was pretty rough. So here I'm just kind of reestablishing my highlights. I'm thinning them down a little bit to make them just a little sharper. The sharper we can create these highlights, the more the illusion of reflection will be. If these highlights are really wide, we kind of lose that idea of reflection. But if we can keep them really sharp and tight, we get a more of an idea that the material is reflecting. If it was less reflective, we could be a little broader with those highlights. Again, if it's that flat leather, like this girl's got the flat leather, we can be a little broader with the highlights. You notice the transitions are quite different between the two because we want different materials. We have a a lot broader of a highlight. We're running a lot more of a higher midtone with this girl, whereas with him we're running a lot more of the darker midtone with just really sharp highlights, because it'll give the idea of a little bit more reflective, a little bit more skin tight material. So once I get pretty close and I'm kind of happy with these highlights, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to place a couple spots of light, and these are going to be where reflective light would hit. So I'm going to take that white that I got out, the ghost white, right here. It's a pretty bright white, but again, I'm not going pure white. It's a cool white. I'm just going to come in, and where my brightest reflection points are going to be, I'm just going to put little dots. The camera's washing these out a little bit. You're probably not seeing them quite as bright as I am.
Are there any colors you would suggest avoiding using when you're trying to accomplish painting black? Like what are common mistakes?
Try to use the bland flat grays. Don't go in and use battleship gray or fortress gray. You know, the very saturated grays. We want to stay away from those. We want colored grays. I really like the blues in mine. A lot of people will actually come in, and that's one thing they can kind of show, is a lot of people will come in with a pure blue and put some pure blue, kind of like what I did with the red. They'll do the same thing with pure blue. They'll create a wash, and you'll see right at this point where the highlights meet, they'll put in just a touch of pure blue. It does give it a little bit of a blue look, but it adds color to it, and you know that someone was trying to paint black, not painting monochrome. So the blue will help, but you can't get, just like the red, you can't get carried away with the blue. And we don't want that blue going in. We don't want that blue going into the shadows, because it'll soften those shadows. We want to keep those shadows nice and tight. So that's where we're gonna put the reds into the shadows. You might add a little bit of that blue just to the transition point where you hit from your mid-tone to your highlight. So we have defined areas that we're going to add colors to. If we put too much blue in, the model will start to read as blue, and we want it to read as black. Okay, so now you can see we have our highlights in place. We have our dots of light and everything like that. We're starting to see, but it still reads black. It's not reading as a gray, just kind of a gray flat model. It's definitely got more black into it. Different tips for painting black fur or hair. Hair, if we're going to paint black hair, we're going to paint hair just like non-metallic metals. You have to have your reflected light. You have to have your bright lights. Oh, where's that figure at? I might have him put away right now. But when you're painting a black hair, you're going to have very little black in black hair. If you look at black hair that people have, there's going to be a lot of the different colors that are around it. You're going to have some browns, you're going to have some reds, you're going to have some blues, stuff like that. Your transitions are going to be really sharp and really fast, though, almost like what we're doing with the latex. It needs to be really fast, really sharp reflection. So kind of imagine you're painting non-metallic metals with hair. For fur, it will be kind of the opposite. You're still going to have that reflectiveness about it, but a lot of fur is normally slightly grimy, and once an animal dies, it loses a lot of the oils that it has in its skin. So the hair becomes a little flatter, a little more brittle. So you would paint that more in the style of something like her right here when you're painting the fur, if you're painting the black fur. Whenever you're doing like an organic black, you need to make sure that you're adding some reds and browns to it, because organic black is actually just a lot of browns with really deep pigment. You don't see a pure black. If you ever see a person that's hair is dyed black, it always looks unnatural because it's a pure black, and nature doesn't have a pure black. It's always browns and stuff like that. So make sure, even my base coat on black hair would be a dark brown. So I hope that answered.
Live fur, yeah. Jesus, laugh out loud. That was a great question, Lee. Thank you.
So now, I mean, I'm at the point where I'm probably just going to go in and kind of start to clean up the model. He's pretty close to being done for tabletop. I mean, obviously the rest of the model needs to be detailed, but the blacks are pretty done. It's a little garish looking on the camera. Once he's smaller, it's not quite as heavy as what you were seeing before. So you can see that's probably about what the model would look like at the tabletop. You can see how short and how fast those reflections are now. As we were zoomed in, you were really seeing how bright and dense everything was. I really want to show you guys how far your mid-toes and stuff go. But as we zoom out, you can see the model really starts to take on a nice light to it. So it's really reading as black now. Mm-hmm. You're not seeing all the grays and the blues and stuff like that. So that's pretty much my technique for painting black.
That's awesome.
So I'll go ahead and open it up for questions.
Yeah, if you guys want to unmute. And Ken's asking to post a picture of it up in the Hobby Hangout when we're done.
Absolutely.
So you were using paint for the washes. What about using inks? Same technique?
Yeah, yes and no. The problem with inks is that they dry glossy. So if the model is more flat color, the glossy shadows might detract, and they might even create reflections that you don't want there. One of the big tricks with non-metallic metals, and Aaron's the one that taught me this, is to put a reflection point in your deepest shadows. That really gives the idea of reflection. Like on this guy's leg right here, you'll notice this leg is looking a little flat. There's just something missing there. If I were to come in and just put just a little touch of reflection right here at the deepest parts of the shadows, you'll notice it takes more shape. The leg defines itself a little bit more. Again, right here, to carry that line of light across the model. If you start to add those little points of light right there, that little point that I put right there, do the same thing right here. You'll see a little point in the shadow like that. It gives more of an idea of reflected light, because even shadow areas will pick up reflected light, refracted light, stuff like that. Non-metallic metals, it's essential for. On a model like this, yeah, you you kind of feel your way through it. You can definitely use inks. I'm not saying don't use them. It just depends on what the style is that you're after. If the model is going to be very flat, very pastel looking, you don't want to put inks in there. But if you're going to have like metallics, if you're going to paint the weapon in metallics, ink really wouldn't be a bad idea. It helped tie the metallics on the model with the armor that you painted, and that'll help kind of tie that together too. So it's kind of rambling answer, but
Well, I was more playing devil's advocate.
So you could use ink on like black armor that's going to have a little bit of reflectiveness to it, as opposed to using it on black cape that's cloth. It's going to be more flat, correct?
yes.
All right.
Are there any absolutes or no-nos for final covers? Like, you definitely don't want it pure gloss. How matte do you want it? Are you using a brush on matte to make sure you don't end up glossing it?
No, I've never really worried about that. If I'm concerned about keeping the same finish to a model, what I'll do is at the end, I paint with a lot of different paints. I paint with P3s, I paint with Reapers, I paint with all that stuff, and they all have different characteristics. Like you'll notice P3 will dry slightly glossy, slightly satiny. And what I'll do at the end is I'll just hit it with dull coat. Like right before I do my metallics, once I finish everything that's not metallic, I'll hit it with dull coat. And dull coat will knock everything down to the same surface texture almost. So you'll get rid of those different areas. But then if I specifically want like a certain finish on a certain piece, like you want to do a very leathery holster that's kind of dusty, and your model's slightly glossy, I would actually come in with matte finish and add that to the paint to give the holster that dull look and not have to dull coat the entire model, you know what I'm saying? So you can use the different finishes to create different shape and to define stuff. You don't have to necessarily just always use color to define everything. Use your textures like that. Use glosses, use matte finishes, stuff like that to help define different textures and different shapes. This helmet and the carapace armor, in fact, would probably look a little better if it was a little more glossy than the pants, because these are like hard plastic. So if they had a slight glossy tint to them, it would probably read a little better as being plastic or Kevlar or whatever you were after, as opposed to cloth.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem I had is I've always added color to the shadow, but I wouldn't do anything for the highlights. So I put in like, reds and purples into my black shadows to give them a little bit more depth, but I never thought about using tinted highlights. So I'd go with the grays and the whites for the highlights, and it just always seemed to be off.
Right, because the model ends up desaturating, and you're seeing the color in the shadows, but you're not seeing anything in the highlights. Your eye reads that. You're like, it's not right, and I don't know what I did that's not right. So it's really fun to look at other people's work and kind of learn. And all of this stuff that I learned was looking at other people's work. Matthew Fontaine is the one that really showed me this first, and when he was telling me about it, it blew my mind. I'd never had the idea. He was putting greens into his shadows for his blacks, and it was really cool. So anyways, I think that's it then. If we don't have any more questions, I'll go ahead and get a picture posted up in the you guys got a reference. And I guess that's it. So thank you guys for coming tonight, and we'll do something fun again next week.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thank you.
Hey, anybody coming to ReaperCon? I just saw the weather report. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is going to be mid to high 70s and sunny.
Nice.
So
right on.
You're just going to need a sweatshirt or a sweater for the evening.
Shorts and a t-shirt weather.
Yep.
Right on.
You're not going to get the oppressive Texas heat.
I like it.
If anybody has any questions that might be catching this video after we're done with the live feed here, like if you're watching on the YouTube channel or anything, Feel free to reach out to Caleb over at CK Studios. You can find our studio page on Facebook at CK Studios, and also always willing to answer questions directly through messages or even through email. So thanks so much, Caleb. That was awesome.
Thank you.